So we're in Thane, Wyoming with Alan Hoops of Silver Star Communications. And nothing has really changed since we first met 21 or 22 years ago, Alan. But I say that in jest because, my gosh, you guys are doing some cool things. And one of them I've read about, but I want to learn a little bit more today. And then maybe we'll have some follow-up conversations with Barb. But in Jackson, it's an area that's traditionally not been your incumbent LEC, but you guys are taking a unique approach there. Why don't you tell us about how you're going to build that out?
Yeah, we are looking at building an open access network on our own. Basically, we would own it and control it, but it would be open to all providers that want to come. We've got interest so far, I think, in about 3 or 4 providers that will be on the network, but they will have NNI connections in different locations depending on where they can get on. But we would haul them to Jackson to be able to be on that provider network.
And so we won't go too much into the technical details today, but from a city standpoint, how did you approach the city? What were their thoughts on this?
Again, Barbara Sessions, our president, did a lot of the groundwork, and I was not directly involved. But basically, we talked to the mayor, we talked to some of the town council members and other people in the state that had an interest in broadband, and they were all very supportive of the idea as a potential template of how to do something different for an open access network, but still commercially originated.
I would imagine they must like the concept of kind of dig once. And is that part of the concept of this?
That's part of it. A lot of these open access networks, they are taken on by municipalities, and then I think a lot of times municipalities don't really realize how much is really involved in running a network. And it's not, sometimes there's a mindset in government that it's a one and done kind of thing, but it's not. It's dynamic. It's always changing, and there's always changes in technology, changes in how you're building to different portions of the city or county or wherever it is. And then as you have growth, you're always having to manage that growth and keep it viable and active.
Well, and you have some experience, or Silver Star has some experience being a tenant on an open access network, right?
We do. We've been on both the Ammon network, Ammon, Idaho, in the past. We've been on Utopia and Idaho Falls. And yes, we have experienced being on those networks, and sometimes they're not really very carrier friendly, just because it's a challenge for the carrier to get the provider to respond, sometimes timely, and then the customer, the end user, is frustrated. So we definitely have some ideas about how a better experience can be created.
Well, and I'd love to kind of go into more depth on those, and I think we can later. One of the things when we met, it was at Pasco, and you've been heavily involved in the industry, and you made a comment a couple minutes ago about things are changing, and this is part of it. Why don't you talk to that for your industry peers?
Yeah, so with the BEAD money that's going to be coming into existence here soon, I believe it's around $44 billion roughly that the government's going to put into the networks across the country. Largely, many municipalities will be the winner of those funds, and I'm sure counties will also be successful in winning them. So with all this money in the system, we've got networks in various parts of our region that we've already built, and we basically felt like we need to take control of our destiny. So it's better to own and have some involvement in a managed open network that we can control, rather than having our assets stranded, which are already in several of these communities. And so that's the approach that we decided to take, is to basically build an open network, make it so that at least we can recover our costs and, make a margin on our network, and then still allow multiple providers into that network, so there's some competition in terms of pricing and so forth.
And from a municipal standpoint, as you pointed out, it's got to make it a lot easier for them.
It is a lot easier for them. As I said earlier, it's, there's a lot in building a network and keeping it going and keeping it up and running. And I think there's also a perception in that these are going to be a big boon to a lot of municipalities. And they may be to some of the larger, bigger ones, but to the smaller, more rural ones, it's just not the biggest money-making thing that's out there. But there is the perception that it's going to pay for roads and schools and all these things, and I just don't think there's as much revenue as a lot of these towns believe there is. So.
Well, and then that gets back into kind of your earlier comments. You alluded to then that you're not necessarily putting the money back into the network, which you need to do.
Exactly. You're constantly trying to reinvest in the network. You're looking for new technologies. There's over time, there's going to be speed changes. People are going to demand more and more bandwidth, and there's going to be more devices on the network, which are going to load up the network as well.
Yeah, and if you're not putting that money back into the network and putting it into something else in the community, then
yeah, exactly. It'd be like the road that you never do anything with, and you look at it in 20 years, it's got cracks in it. It's all falling apart. So, yeah, you have to keep it up.
Well, that's a great analogy. Well, Alan, it's always great to catch up with you.
Yeah,
and,
Ken, it's
congratulations.
always nice to see you again. Thank you so much. Appreciate the time.